all come from 1997, Edward Teller, Lowell Wood, and Roderick Hyde. So Teller is known lovingly by his own friends as Dr. Evil. And this is the Lawrence Livermore National Lab. He wrote this paper, Global Warming and Ice Ages, Prospects for Physics-Based Modulation of Global Change. So he's like, hey, man, we could use physics to prevent global warming by, screwing with everything with geoengineering. So this idea is not new. Marchetti and Butico, and these are back to the 70s, even in a JFK paper in 62. You can see all this on weathermodificationhistory.com. JFK had a paper where they talked about putting monolayer films on the ocean to prevent hurricanes and geoengineering ideas back in the 60s. So this is not a new idea, but it really gets its modern day push when Edward Teller runs his mouth. And I want to point this out for the record. Edward Teller invented the hydrogen bomb as a weapon that should never be used. Quote, if you read the quotes out there, it goes something like this. This weapon is so scary that by creating it, we will ensure that it'll never be used. You know what I mean? So in this situation, is geoengineering just the same thing? Is it, deterrence? Is it a threat to the world that if you don't clean up your emissions, if you don't stop polluting the environment, geoengineering is the weapon that should never be used? That's what you're going to get. So I think, in my personal opinion, that is exactly what it was. I think that the guy may have been a sick genius all along, and hopefully his idea is so perverse that nobody actually helps it to come to fruition. And the reason why this really gets a push is then, and most people don't know this, Ken Caldera. And everybody, probably the viewers we have right now that are with this live broadcast, you guys probably already know the name Ken Caldera. And I'm going to show you his picture here in just a minute. But Ken Caldera is a very important individual because he came along and validated this crazy Dr. Evil's theory. He was asked to make a computer model where he modeled the future and said, if geoengineering were to occur, what would the results be? And this was his pat on the back saying, yeah, it looks pretty good. Actually, we did cool the planet. It wasn't that bad. And it's called Long Range Weather Prediction and Prevention of Climate Catastrophes, a status report. The first paper was 97. The second paper was 99, followed up by a final paper with just Teller, Wood, and Hyde again in 2002. So this is the main three papers, in my opinion, that really pushed this all. And then finally, you've got Paul Crutzen, the Nobel Prize winner, Albedo Enhancement by Stratospheric Sulfur Injections, a contribution to resolve a policy dilemma. And he said, quote, building a trust between scientists and the general public would be needed to make such a large-scale climate modification acceptable, even if it would be judged to be advantageous. So even if we decide this is a good idea to do legal geoengineering worldwide, there better be a lot of trust between the scientists and the public. We all know that ain't the case. Finally, I repeat, the very best would be if emissions of greenhouse gases could be reduced so much that the stratospheric sulfur release experiment would not need to take place. Currently, this looks like a pious wish. Stratospheric sulfur release experiment. Keep that in your notes. So after, this has got its modern push, now, of course, all you need is some money. And everybody's favorite fun guy, Bill Gates, threw some money at it. And here's I'm going to tell the whole story on this guy, this Pfizer thing, Fund for Innovative Climate and Energy Research. Bill Gates is funding geoengineering research. Now, there is a caveat. I don't want to totally throw him under the bus. Bill did say, I will not fund any actual experiments. So Bill is saying, I will pay for you to study this, to write it down on paper, to basically build a weapon system for the future. But I will not pay for you to actually do it because he doesn't want the responsibility. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to be the guy that gets sued. So what does he do? He gives the money to Ken Caldera and David Keith, and they dole it out to everybody else. So the administrators of Bill Gates Fund, most people don't know this right here, Fund for Innovative Climate and Energy Research. These are funding sources right here. Bill Gates or David Keith and Ken Caldera, they both run that fund. And all of the scientists basically come to them and beg for money. And who are those scientists? You can see them over here. Here's Ken Caldera and Alan Robach. This is a chart that shows who is writing the most articles about geoengineering, solar radiation management. And you can see that it's Alan Robach, Ken Caldera, Ben Kravitz, David Keith, Peter Irvine, and a couple of, the list goes even smaller, Jim Haywood, Phil Rosh. I know all these names. You guys should get to know these names, but Olivier Boucher. These are the guys pushing this stuff. Interestingly enough, Olivier Boucher, Robach, and Ben Kravitz, and Ken Caldera also co-authored the special report on contrails to the IPCC. So it's interesting that these 5 geoengineers co-authored the IPCC reports on chemtrails. They just said it wasn't a thing and it's not really doing anything. And, anyway, interesting thing. And who's paying for it? The National Science Foundation, European Commission, NASA, and the list goes smaller. These are the people funding research for legal geoengineering in the future. So names, addresses, that's what I'm all about. That's what you're going to get on climateviewer.com. All of this information right here, these 2 slides and the links to it, climateviewer.com/geoengineering. So what are the projects? The Silver Lining Project. This is John Latham and Stephen Salter. They originally called it the Silver Lining Project. They deleted their Silver Lining Project website. I found it on the Wayback Machine. So I calls it the Silver Lining Project. But they call it the Marine Cloud Brightening Project now. And the idea is to take sea salt, blow it up into a cloud, make the cloud white, and that'll reflect sunlight. They want to use thousands of these. These are remote controlled drones. This is Bill Gates' own moneymaker. This is Intellectual Ventures. The company is owned by Nathan Myhrvold, which is an ex-Microsoft CEO who is known as the world's biggest patent troll. If you Google patent troll, you're going to see Nathan Myhrvold. Nathan Myhrvold owns Intellectual Ventures. It's a joint Bill Gates thing. They invented the Stratoshield, which is a hose to the sky, which is basically a blimp that carries a hose all the way up into the stratosphere and lets them spray chemicals directly into it, like sulfuric acid, titanium oxide, aluminum oxide, and the aforementioned diamond dust. Can't make this stuff up. So then we have the Stratospheric Particle Injection for Climate Engineering, or SPICE project. This was actually a field test. They were going to tow a blimp behind a boat over in the UK and create some clouds with it, and then go down here on this island, measure how much sunlight they block. So this was a geoengineering SRM field test, okay? Well, that was a no-no. The etc. group, ETC group, came out and protested real heavily on that, and this thing never happened. So big shout out to Jim Thomas and the boys over at etc. group. You guys should check them out. That's an actual anti-geoengineering group that actually did something. So big shout out to them. Everybody go check out ETC group. And then this is the most important slide in the whole damn thing, in my opinion. And interestingly enough, while I was at Ed Griffin's conference, this slide was damaged. And this is a coincidence. For all the conspiracy guys out there, you're going to see it happen. This slide, this quote, and the picture of all the geoengineers was ripped out. There's John Latham right there. This was damaged. And I had to recite this from memory, which I did. But this quote, this is in 2010. All these guys got together in Pacific Grove, California, and this is the quote of the day. In other words, if the public comes to see geoengineering, as one attendee put it, a crazy idea cooked up by rich Anglo-Saxons to dominate the climate, then they will all be rightfully tarred and feathered. Now, I was listening to Ken Caldera. I was a member of his geoengineering forum. And he really didn't like a response I had to him, because basically they had a paper that said what does the public think about geoengineering? And it came back 80% negative. Basically, they said, we don't want that. That's a bad idea. Why would we ever do it? And Ken Caldera just really surprised me. He came back and he said, and this is the geoengineering group, just so everybody can see that this is a real thing. I debated Ken Caldera and David Keith and the boys in here for like 2-3 years, from 2012 to 2015 when they kicked me out. And the point being that Ken said, if they just framed the question differently, I think we would have got better results. And I said to Ken, you are not a honest researcher anymore. You are a lobbyist. You are someone who is trying to change public perception through perception management techniques. You're trying to frame the question in a way to get the answer you want. And I guarantee you, if you keep this up, I'll be coming with the tar and feathers. Oh my God. I triggered Ken Caldera. So he was so triggered, he kicked me from his forum and he removed my original post where I made a legal argument against these guys. It is the second most viewed post on his entire forum. And in it, I basically said, cloud seeding's been around for 60 years. They cannot scientifically prove to the National Academy of Science that it has any efficacy whatsoever. But you guys are going to come along and in the span of a year or two, say you're going to do global cloud seeding in the stratosphere that's going to affect rainfall patterns, and you think you're going to get away with it just by making up a new word, geoengineering, to circumvent all the weather modification laws on the books, all of which you can read on climatebureau.com. And that thing got so many views from so many lawyers and all that's coming on there. Well, he deleted my post the same day that he kicked me from the forum. So I know that was something that really was a thorn in his spine. Well, it turns out he didn't delete the whole thread though. So you could see Ken Caldera respond to me and you can still read my original post. My legal argument still there to this day, even though he got triggered by the tar and feather. So my point is, long story short, if you see Ken Caldera, tell him that Jim Lee says, I'm bringing the tar and feathers. Oh, that's wonderful. So that helped me clear my throat. Thank you, Ken Caldera. And the other quote of the day from this is, as for the U.S. Department of Defense, forget about it to this group. Such involvement prompts nightmares of a new military-industrial geoengineering complex. Whoa. So is history truly repeating itself? Like it did with cloud seeding and Operation Popeye? Yes, it is. So geoengineering will kill people. And these are quotes directly from Ken Caldera's forum. And this is the meat and potatoes of why I do what I do. Let me bring this up over here on the other, just so I can really rub it in, if I can. All right, so let's just do this. All right, so it's likely that SRM geoengineering intervention will create winners and losers, and some nations may always be against the intervention whatsoever. In any given year, there are floods, droughts, heat waves, but during this field trial, a fraction of these events would be attributed, rightfully or wrongfully, partially or fully, to the intervention. Two questions arise. Could it be determined if any changes in the climate outside of the target area had occurred as a result of the intervention during a 10-year trial? How would aggrieved nations or peoples seek reparations for perceived negative impacts, scientifically proven or otherwise? So he's saying, if we ever do legalize geoengineering and we do a 10-year trial of this, if somebody gets hurt, if there's any kind of freak weather, we're going to be to blame. How are we going to pay the dead people? So that's really the only thing that's holding up this legal geoengineering that's being put